Before we begin, I'd like to beg your patience for a few minutes. I don't know where I'm going necessarily with this, and I don't know how long it's going to take me. So that means that since I don't know where I'm going and how long it's going to take, I can stop anytime and say I'm there, right? So that's the way we're going to go with it. Typically, I'm a good sleeper. Typically. I have been blessed for many years that I can go to bed and within just a few minutes, as it aggravates my wife, within just a very few minutes, I can be asleep. And typically, throughout the night, I stay asleep. Without the occasional biological break, I can just sleep right on through. Nothing bothers me too much. And I think that's probably because during the daytime, somebody might compare my mind to the rocking chair. You know, it's constantly busy even though it doesn't accomplish much. But at night, I'm able to kind of turn it off. It just goes away. Last night wasn't one of those nights. Last night, I went to bed like normal and went to sleep pretty much like normal and woke up about 1:30 and couldn't go back to sleep, which again is odd for me. And I was up for a while. I know it was at least 4 o'clock before I went back to sleep. My mind wouldn't turn off. It just kept clicking away. And I think as you get to my age, which you turn around and boom, you're my age. And you can look back at your life and you can see a lot of things that have happened in your life. And this is the teacher in me that comes from my mom and dad. I want a chalkboard that I can write on. And I started thinking about my life and started thinking, you know, your life is a bunch of curves. There's a bunch of inflection points. You can tell Michael I used inflection points. It's a bunch of inflection points. And an inflection point is just simply when you're going along a curve and then all of a sudden the curve changes direction. And it doesn't have to be a bad direction. You don't have to be going in a bad direction and then all of a sudden you change and go in a good direction. You could be going in an okay direction and all of a sudden it changes, it goes in a different direction that's still good. It's just an inflection. It's a change. And I was sitting there thinking, I was laying there thinking, there are a number of places in my life that I can look back and say that was an inflection point. That was a change in my life. That was something that caused something drastic to happen. 1999 was one of those years where something drastically happened in my life, where God said, you know what, I think he needs a little oomph. He needs a little help to try to keep studying more. And so Brother Dwayne and Brother Billy came over and said, Chris and Ben, you need to study more. Come preach. And it's been a great thing for me because I have some of the most dearest friends in the world here. And it's helped me. It was something that God planned for me that I didn't have in plans at all. 1994 was a great plan, was a great curve change for me. I was graduating college, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as they said. I had my engineering degree. I was ready to go, get me a job, make the world a better place. I was probably going to go back to Alabama, you know, the great state of Alabama, you know, the promised land, all that stuff. I was going to go back there and live where my family lived and all that. And God said, no, there's an opportunity over in West Tennessee. Never been to West Tennessee. Never been over in this direction. He placed me in Lexington, Tennessee in a job, and a great family took me in, and a wonderful wife now of almost 27 years. Almost, next month. I didn't see that coming. That wasn't in my plans. But God has a way of putting things in your plans. 1991. I had just finished my 2 years. Now, it's amazing what you think about in the middle of the night. I had finished 2 years of college at Martin in Pulaski, Tennessee. I can't tell you right now if I graduated. I know I finished 2 years, but I don't know if I had enough credits to graduate from there. It didn't matter. I was going on somewhere else anyways. But I was sitting there thinking, did I actually graduate? Did I get a degree from there? I can't tell you if I did or not. But I went on. I had a choice. I was going to either go into business or I was going to go into engineering, and that was just because that was the two choices that I came up with. And I went to Tennessee Tech. I had never been there before. I went to Tennessee Tech to school. And I went and I attached myself to a congregation there, Jerry Whitson. And I met some great people. I met a lot of great people, some of which I was able to visit with this past weekend. But there was one specific fellow who took a liking to me, and I don't know why. I guess he wasn't from Tennessee either, and so he figured I wasn't from Tennessee, and he wasn't from Tennessee, so we had something in common. Brother Lawrence Stevens. And he was a preacher there. And he was gregarious, outgoing, kind of opposite from me in a lot of ways, I think. And yet we got along great. And he looked after me and he encouraged me. He helped me. He came for a meeting here not long after we started here. And every time I saw him, he would smile that big. I hit a home run one time, and he happened to be there. And every time after that, he mentioned that home run to me. Because he remembered the good things about me. Brother Lauren passed away this past week. And I think he's another inflection in my curve in life. And there's no telling how many people he affected because of his personality. His preaching, yes, but his personality. He was an encourager. He was someone who took an interest in people. And so I'm sitting there thinking in the middle of the night, thinking, number one, I need to go to sleep because I'm going to be tired in the morning. But thinking also how God's plans sometimes overrule our plans. God is there in the midst of everything that we do. When you think of people in the Bible and you think of people like Joseph, who went through awful things, sold into slavery by his brothers, into a land that he didn't want to go, into a position that he had no plans of being in, and then his life and how he stayed faithful, and then at the end of his life, after his father had passed away, that his brothers came to him, still remembering what they had done to him, and they said, you know, when Dad passed away, he said, make sure you're good to your brothers, Genesis chapter 50. And Joseph realized what they said, and he said, I know that what you did, you meant for evil, but God meant it for good. There are things that happen in our lives that God is there. It's the providence of God. He didn't make anything miraculous happen when he sent me to Cookeville, Tennessee. Nothing miraculous happened when I received a job here in Lexington, Tennessee, or when I came to visit you for the first time in May of 1999. But God was there. How do we accept God's providence? You ever thought about that much? How do we accept his providence? I had time to think, so I was thinking. And you know, I think the answer is very simple. You accept God's providence by simply doing what is right. It's not, I can't come up with any great answers for things because I'm too simple-minded. But you just simply do what's right. How did Joseph accept the providence of God? He simply, day by day, did what was right. And so therefore God blessed him. Do you think Daniel had in his mind when he was a young man that he was going to go off as a captive into a foreign land? No. But what did he do? He chose to serve God on a daily basis. And God's hand was with him. And he rose such that he was, in essence, third in the kingdom at one particular time. He simply chose to do what was right. God is there in our lives. And if we want to accept him in our lives, and we want to see after 50 some odd years of your life, and you look back and see what happened in your life, and you want to see where God helped you, just do what's right. And you'll see Him in there. You'll see the blessings that He showers upon you. You'll see some things you say, I don't know why that happened, but boy, I'm glad it did. And here's one more thing for you. This is all free. You ain't even having to pay me for it. It's all free. There's one more thing for you. Always be aware that you may be the person who changes the path of someone else. You thought about that? You could be the person that changes the path of someone else. I rather doubt that Lauren Stevens thought that 28 years, 20 whatever years, after he met me, that I'd be preaching and that I would be mentioning his name. But so many people that he affected. Of that group that was there at that time, when I call that group, I'm talking about as younger folk at the time. We now have 3 people that I'm aware of that are attempting to preach the gospel. And we were a group of, 10 people, give or take? 3, and that's including the women, 3 of that group are attempting to preach the gospel. 1 I know positively, and maybe more than 1, that are elders out of that group. He had a great impact. You may have a great impact on others. You may be the one that people look back and say, I remember when I met Keith Bumgardner, and I remember what he did for me. Do you think Priscilla and Aquila, the first time they met Paul in Acts chapter 18, thought that they would continue to be an influence on him? You see, they had something in common. They were tent makers. And because of that, and because of the faith that they had, and because they were righteous people, they became close friends. And multiple times in his epistles, in his letters, he mentions Aquila and Priscilla. They were great encouragements to him. I don't know what they did, but whatever it was, he remembered them. They helped him. You may be the person who changes the trajectory of someone else. So that should impact the way that we live. In Colossians 4 and verse 3. In Colossians 4 and verse 3, I want you to notice what Paul also says here. Beginning in verse 2, he says, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us. Notice, pray also for us, that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison. How much do we rely upon God and we think that God will work in our lives? Should we ask God to work in our lives? Paul did. Did you notice that? Paul did. I could go around the room, and for the most part, I could probably talk about each one of your families and say, there is something in your life right now that you're having to deal with. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, just something you're dealing with, that you want God's help with. I have 2 kids in college. I have one that's within a month of graduating. Graduating college. I'm old. Graduating college. What is in front of her next? What is it she's going to do? Where is she going to be? Who is she going to meet? Obviously, you can tell that's my daughter, not my son that's graduating, right? I don't know. And you know what's worse? I can't control it. As a dad, that's worse. I want to control it. I want to put the gates around it, put up the old bowling things, where they couldn't hit strikes, right? You'd put up the little bars and gates and stuff, make it go. I want to put them up for her, and I want to say, this is what I want to happen to her, and I want this to happen, I want it all to be good and no problems, and I can't control any of it. Not a bit. But I can do one thing. I can pray. I can pray that God will be in her life and that God will open up opportunities for her to do good, to be faithful, and to find someone else that will help her to be faithful. You may have child or children that's in that same boat, in that same area. You may have children in high school. I could go around the room, and I'm pretty sure I could pick out some situation in your particular life, and I could say, this is something you could pray about. Pray that God will work in your life, that He will open up doors of opportunity to serve Him. To serve Him. Not just to know Him. You need to know Him. But you need to serve Him. And then, this is my final point. And I would say I'm going to get into my lesson, but I've gone too long. I'm not even going to get into my lesson. This is your lesson for the day. It's short. And then, as you're praying that God will work in your life and that God will work in the lives of the people that you love, serve Him on a daily basis. That's how we become influences on other people. It's simply by serving Him on a daily basis. There you go. I didn't know where I was going or how long I was going to get there. But I'm done. And we're not going to cover my lesson because it would take too long. I'd apologize for the emotions, but I told Lee not long ago, I said, don't worry about being emotional in our group. We've come to understand that that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Brother Lawrence Stevens was a great encouragement to me. And I know it was to others. But you are too. Every single person in this room is an encouragement to others. I don't know if you noticed it, but I tried to make eye contact with everyone that was looking at me. You are all an encouragement to others. Or, because of the way that we live, we cause them to go the other direction. The inflection can be up, or the inflection can be down. Which one do you want it to be? Serve God today. If you're not a child of God, become one. If you are one, like me, try to every day say, I know I didn't do all the things that were right. Because there's a lot of days, there's a lot of things I don't do right. But I can try better. Father, forgive me. Help me to do better. If there's something we can do to help you this morning in making your life right with God, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?